Every once in a while, we'll come across superheroes who somehow fit into the superpowered world without actually having any superpowers. Whether they're empowered by an adept skill, a vast fortune, a powerful serum, or even a mixture of all of those things, some superheroes are just people. Hit Girl is already an extremely impressive fighter, having been trained in martial arts since she was basically an infant. Adept in weapons training with guns, hand-to-hand combat, and tactical strategy, Hit Girl doesn't stop at anything to take her enemies out of the equation. And considering she has almost no problem taking down full-sized adults as an actual child, there is no question in my mind that she needs to be on this list. The only reason why she isn't at a higher tier is that, well, we all know that there are just plenty of other hard hitters in the running. Okay, coming in at number 9, we've got Black Widow. Black Widow is one of the most impressive superheroes that gets all of her power from martial arts and weapons training alone. Sometimes being accused of being too OP in the MCU for her power set, this highly trained assassin trains hard for her impressive fighting abilities. She has a long history, beginning in the 60s, and has shown that some people are just more skilled than others at holding on to their martial arts training. Black Widow is even credited with having taken down the likes of Spider-Man in the past, which says a lot, and she's even somehow contended with Iron Man in one instance, which is only one of many examples of why she deserved a spot on this list. At number 8 is the Punisher. One word: guns. The Punisher has gotten so good with guns that he doesn't need much more than a couple of pistols and a stone cold heart to take control over his enemies. To be fair, Frank Castle doesn't really deal with enemies much beyond the world of street crime and the human world, but he's still had his fair share of run-ins with superheroes and held his own. In fact, he's credited with taking down Batman himself and even Wolverine at one point. Although to be fair, Wolverine is in pretty dire straits at the time and Frank has access to a steamroller. But still, the Punisher is very seldom at the mercy of anyone, and it's pretty impressive that he's just a human who uses nothing but weaponry and cold hard confidence to get things done. At number 7 is Dick Grayson, aka Nightwing. Nightwing is the first sidekick that Batman ever had, which makes him the longest standing disciple of Batman. And considering Batman is arguably one of the kings of non-superpowered heroes, this says a lot. Having grown up by Bruce Wayne's side for all that time, Nightwing has seen tons of combat and has learned a lot about making efficient use of weapon and gadget loadouts in high-stakes situations. This training gives him enough skill and confidence to go out into the world under his own moniker of Nightwing and make a major name for himself. Being the current leader of the Teen Titans, Dick Grayson already has tons of experience for such a young hero and stands out among other heroes that also have the advantage of actual powers under their belts. At number 6, we have Green Arrow. Now, this was a toss-up between Green Arrow and Hawkeye, but I only had room for one bow and arrow guy on this list. Now, for someone who doesn't actually have any powers and just relies on his skill set as an archer, Green Arrow is extremely impressive. It seems as well that he doesn't even need to equip himself with much defensive gear because his offensive skill is so OP that he can just overwhelm his opponents before they can get a hit in. I mean, he can shoot 33 arrows a minute. That's basically like shooting an extremely high caliber machine gun with perfect accuracy. And he also has a huge array of trick arrows that he can switch out without hesitating, like his exploding tip arrows, which pack a huge punch to his attack strength. And if his enemies can somehow protect themselves from that, he also has a great stealth stat, which allows him to slip away into the shadows to reassess his next approach. He's just one of the more impressive heroes without powers out there, and I wanted to make sure he got his due credit. At number 5, we have Daredevil. Daredevil gets a spot higher up on the list because on top of not having any powers, he's famously as blind as a bat. Now, you may be eager to contest this one because it's been said that Daredevil does have heightened senses due to his run-in with toxic waste, but it's never been confirmed that his senses are heightened because of the chemicals or simply as a natural response to his loss of eyesight. But either way, he can't see, for crying out loud, so if you wanted to argue that being able to hear and feel things really accurately is considered an advantage when you can't even see, then you can go ahead, but I don't know if I'd agree with you. The truth is, what would normally be seen as a shortcoming by anyone else actually becomes one of the hero's primary motivators to try that much harder at what he does. And not to mention, he's first introduced as a skilled lawyer defending the likes of Namor with his quick wit and cunning. And those abilities always count to some degree as well on a list ranked by power. At number 4, we have Cyborg. Sometimes heroes are endowed with supercharged upgrades, which are basically synonymous with actual powers. One example of that is with Cyborg, who after losing some of his body parts is given massive bionic upgrades. There are a multitude of different offensive and defensive features to his robotic suit, or whatever you'd call it. Is it a suit? Because it makes up part of his face. Either way, even just his laser cannon is enough to have him fit in with the other heroes, but ever since he's been outfitted with the boom tube, he's only climbed higher in the ranks. Not to mention his white noise cannon and the mother box more recently. The boom tube, first of all, adds teleportation to his arsenal, the white noise cannon can rip enemies apart instantly, and the mother box gives him access to the multiverse, which brings Cyborg to a whole other level. And considering he's only human somewhere beneath all that tech and armor, it just makes him that much more impressive. At number 3, we have the one and only Captain America. Okay, don't kill me, you may disagree with me on this one, and I'm open to a discussion in the comments, but it's simply the truth that Captain America, and Bucky Barnes for that matter, doesn't actually have superpowers. When they are tested on and given their powers by the super soldier serum, they are only given increases in strength, durability, and fighting skill at the peak of human ability, meaning they are still entirely human and are not actually known to be superhuman, just extremely efficient humans. And as insanely powerful and awesome as these heroes are, don't want to bash them in any way, I just don't think that being extremely efficient humans constitutes having superpowers. Now, I know that some powers are acquired through circumstance, like by falling into a barrel of toxic waste or being, I don't know, bitten by a radioactive spider, but the super soldier serum just simply doesn't give Steve Rogers superhuman powers, just peak human performance. And honestly, I'm not complaining. That's enough for me. At number 2, we have Batman. Bruce Wayne is the perfect example to demonstrate that a good person who is very motivated, dedicated, and, oh yeah, has billions of dollars at their disposal can basically make someone superpowered. I mean, do I even have to convince you that Batman deserves one of the top spots on a list about non-superpowered heroes? Other than being a master detective and tactical genius, Bruce Wayne has trained hard enough to be considered one of the most skilled and agile fighters in the DC universe as well. Matching this up with his unprecedented arsenal of gadgets, vehicles, and weaponry, Batman becomes unstoppable. And it's sometimes easy to forget that under the mask is someone just like us who simply took advantage of his privilege in a way that almost no other superhero has ever done. Almost. Which brings us to number 1, with the one and only Iron Man. Iron Man has got to be one of the coolest superheroes out there, and he doesn't have any powers. I know you know this, I'm just saying it, reminding myself and everyone out there. Taking the concept of a medieval suit of armor and modernizing it to the point that Tony Stark does is one of the coolest and most effective ways I've ever seen a hero go from mortal to superpowered being ever. With only a genius mind and, yeah, a couple million, billion, trillion bucks, I don't know how he affords all that stuff, Iron Man has no issue keeping up with nearly any superhero. And that includes beings from other dimensions with powers incomprehensible to even the most superpowered beings out there. With his genius AI system, extremely durable metals, and adeptly engineered mechanics, the Iron Man armor is born. And it's such an impressive feat that even those with little to no training in hand-to-hand or weapons combat can be put into one of these suits and keep up with the likes of the Avengers, i.e. Pepper Potts in the MCU, which I don't know if that was very believable, but that maybe the suit is just that crazy. There's just no question that Iron Man would be at number 1 on this list, and as one of my top 3 superheroes of all time, it's just that much cooler to me that he's just a person. Tony Stark didn't wait on a barrel of toxic waste or a radioactive spider to come his way. He took on the challenge of turning himself into a superhero, and he succeeded on a cosmic level.
In at 10, Connor Hawke. Connor Hawke is the son of Oliver Queen and Sandra Hawke, and takes over the Green Arrow mantle after his father's death. When introduced in Green Arrow Volume 2 number 0 in 1994, he appeared to just be a huge fan of the Green Arrow, but it was later revealed that unbeknownst to Oliver, Connor was in fact his son. It feels fitting that it's my name, honestly. And while he may have had the same skills as his father, although less evolved, Connor does end up gaining a couple powers over his father. One of them being a healing factor granted him due to genetic mutations, this also giving him a higher resistance to pain, and this also allowed him to stay in his prime with ease, much like Logan. And thanks to Connor's Zen training, he was able to develop a form of clairvoyance. This is the ability that gave him a vision of his father still alive, despite the world thinking that he was dead. But while he didn't have any powers, he was still pretty badass. So see, he has a reason to be on this list other than just sharing my name, okay? Plus, clairvoyance doesn't really count as a superpower. It could just be him like wanting it really hard and then like it just being a thing. So hey, look, at one point he didn't have powers. And then I'm Black Widow. Natalia Romanova, aka Black Widow, was a former Russian KGB agent. She was trained by the Red Room as a part of the Black Widow Ops program to be the ultimate super spy. She defected to the United States of America from the Soviet Union to join S.H.I.E.L.D., and later Black Widow would then become a member of the Avengers, and she has been on the team on multiple occasions. She is a woman with a mysterious past which few know about. The exact year and location for the birth of Natasha Romanova is unknown. It has been rumored that Natasha was somehow related to the last ruling Tsars of Russia, but this rumor was never proven. There are varying accounts of Romanova's early life, and this is a part of what makes her so mysterious, but her being mysterious is also part of what makes her such a badass, even without any powers. And it ain't Karate Kid. No, not that Karate Kid. Okay, Mr. Miyagi has nothing over this guy. Karate Kid is actually Val Armour, a superhero from the future and also a member of the Legion of Superheroes. He is a master of every form of martial arts that has been developed by the 30th century. The extent of his skill was so great that he could severely damage various types of hard material with a single blow, and was briefly able to hold his own against Superboy through the use of what he called super karate. So already seeming pretty legit. Val Armour was the son of Japan's greatest crime lord, Kyaru Nezumi, also known as the Black Dragon. When he was born, his mother, the American secret agent Valentina Armour, tried to hide him from his father, but she failed and was killed for her affront. Japan's biggest hero, Sensei Toshiaki, the White Crane, eventually killed Black Dragon for his crimes and adopted the infant Val. He raised Val as if he were his own son and trained him in all manner of martial arts. Val became the youngest warrior ever to earn the title of samurai, and he went to work for his local shogun. However, after trying his best and failing to please his supervisor, he quit and searched the galaxy for new forms of battle to master. This sounds like a superhero my dad would absolutely love. And in 7th, the Punisher. He's known for his violent methods and his high-tech weapons, including his battle van. And in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, which is of course the one I'm going to be talking about, he works with Chip, who monitors him through his computer. His iconic symbol is a large white skull on his chest. Punisher went to New York City thinking that Spider-Man was behind a string of attacks at Empire State University. Later, he would be convinced of this when Spider-Man mutated into Man-Spider. He was later captured and taken to the parking garage of the World Trade Center, and with the help of Kraven the Hunter and Mariah Crawford, Spider-Man was cured. He later returned and thought that Peter was the Green Goblin and kidnapped Mary Jane Watson, but then he captured Harry Osborn, but just still wanted to know what Peter knew about Mary Jane's disappearance. Just as he was about to ask, Mary Jane's clone appeared, and the Punisher let him go. But I mean, I think we all know that Punisher's pretty damn powerful. Just no morals, man. He'll use lethal force. That was the closest they got to saying kill in that show. Lethal force. From the Punisher. That's it. And in 6, Nightwing. Dick Grayson is a vigilante in the Batman family and the original hero known as Robin. Eventually, he outgrew this position because, you know, he was an adult and was inspired by Superman to become Nightwing, while Jason Todd and Tim Drake succeeded him as Robin. Following the disappearance of Bruce Wayne, he succeeded his own mentor to become Batman with Damian Wayne as his Robin. Bruce's return allowed them both to wear the mantle for a short while, although Grayson has since returned to his identity as Nightwing. Very briefly, Dick had considered giving up the whole crime fighting gig, but he couldn't imagine his life any other way. But if he couldn't be Robin, who would he be? Superman had the answer. Long ago on Krypton, a man was cast out by his family, just as Dick had been. He dreamed of a world ruled by justice and set out to protect the helpless of Krypton. His true identity was never revealed, and he was only known as Nightwing. The post-crisis version of Grayson had him also become the first and only Nightwing, with his costume partially inspired by his father. Halfway through, and in number 5, Moon Knight. Mark Spector is better known as the vigilante Moon Knight. Once a mercenary, Mark Spector was left for dead in a desert, where he was revived by the moon god Khonshu. Appointed as Khonshu's fist and high priest, Moon Knight enacts justice to protect those who travel at night. Spectre also suffers from dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID, which has paved the way for use of other identities, including millionaire Stephen Grant and cab driver Jake Lockley. Since the early days, Mark has mostly worked alone, but he's also been a member of a few superhero teams, including the Avengers and Heroes for Hire. As a mercenary, I kinda understand that one. Recently, Mark discovered that he had a daughter named Beatrice with a longtime lover Marlene Arlone. But when Khonshu sensed Mephisto's plans for world domination, Mark left her to fight by his god's side and prevent that from coming true. When Khonshu succumbed to his madness, however, Mark had to turn against him and help the Avengers defeat him. And in 4, Green Arrow. Be it the comic version or the CW version, Green Arrow is one badass mamma jamma, and you're welcome, editor, for not making you censor motherfucker. And ignoring the whole Spectre or anytime he has a lantern ring thing, this guy is wicked skilled. Like, sorry Hawkeye, but there's a reason that Black Widow got the movie and you got a limited Disney Plus series. With his seemingly limitless supply of trick arrows, GA is really able to best anyone who comes his way, including the Monitor in the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover from the CW. Since then, he uses an antimatter arrow to stun him in order to keep fighting off shadow demons so that 3.1 billion additional people could be saved from Earth 38 before its destruction. Plus, we love a hero who was stranded on a deserted island for 5 years that causes him to turn from a billionaire playboy head to a superhero. Maybe to become a superhero, I need a yacht as well. Although mine would be called the King's Gambit, and we'd play checkers, not chess. I also wouldn't bring my girlfriend's sister on board. Mostly because she doesn't have a sister, and because I don't have a girlfriend. But if I had a yacht, I'm sure I would have one. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Daredevil. Daredevil's life is a mix of joy and tragedy. The story of Matt Murdock began with his father, Jonathan, battling Jack Murdock, who raised his sons Matt and Mike alone, claiming Matt's mother had died. Jack wanted his sons to be more successful than him. He impressed upon Matt that he needed to constantly study instead of playing sports with the other kids. Jack had hoped that Matt would become a doctor or a lawyer instead of a uneducated pug like himself. Don't hate on pugs. Just say pig. This led the neighborhood kids to bully the cowardly Matt as Daredevil, while his twin brother came to his aid. Matt took out his frustrations by secretly training in his father's gym. But one day, Matt saw a blind man walking towards an oncoming truck. Matt pushed the man out of the way, but the truck crashed and a radioactive isotope spilled out, striking Matt across the face and blinding him. While recovering in the hospital, Matt discovered that his hearing, smell, taste, and touch were amplified to superhuman degrees. He also developed a sort of radar sense that formed mental pictures of his surroundings. So while he may have heightened senses, he does not have superpowers, okay? He just has a really acute sense of everything but sight, okay? I don't consider that a superpower. That just happens whenever you have to like get rid of one of your senses. If you don't have sight, I feel like your other senses would have to be heightened, just as like a response, like a survival instinct of sorts. Penultimately, in at number 2, Batman. I think we all knew that Batman was going to be on this list, but I'm guessing most of you figured he'd be number 1. And while I can't deny Batman is badass, I can honestly say that I think he's kind of overpowered. Like, it doesn't matter if he's rich. There should be no possible way that he can get whatever he wants whenever he needs it, okay? Like, the best ability that Batman has is plot armor. Not his money or his martial arts mastery or being the world's greatest detective. He can get whatever the story needs or whatever he needs just so he doesn't die, because killing him off would be a horrible idea, money-wise. Like, oh no, Superman's gone bad, but there's only 1 ounce of kryptonite left in this Earth, and it's literally in the core of the Earth, surrounded by molten magma. But he can get it because he's rich. Like, I don't like that. I don't like that. My friend was obsessed with Batman, but honestly, I think he's overrated. And I can hear the sounds of pitchforks and torches being lighted in the comments. Come at me. Batman isn't all that, and that's why he's number 2. He's also number 2 because of the plot armor. That is his ultimate ability, and that's why he's higher on the list. Finally, in at number 1, Iron Man. A wealthy American business magnate, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, inventor, and ingenious scientist, Anthony Edward Tony Stark suffers a severe chest injury during a kidnapping. When his captors attempt to force him to build a weapon of mass destruction, he instead creates a mechanized suit of armor to save his life and escape captivity. Later, Stark developed his suit, adding weapons and other technological devices he designed through his company, Stark Industries. He used his suit and the successive versions of it to protect the world as Iron Man. Although first concealing his true identity, Stark eventually publicly reveals himself to be Iron Man. Initially, Iron Man was a vehicle for Stan Lee to explore Cold War themes, particularly the role of American technology and industry in the fight against communism. Subsequent reimaginings of Iron Man have transitioned from Cold War motifs to contemporary matters of time. Plus, his suits are awesome and way cooler than Batman. That's right, I said it.
Number 10. Huntress. Helena Bertinelli was born into one of the mafia families in Gotham. Her family was murdered in front of her when she was 8 years old, and this image never really left her. She later took to heroics, albeit violent heroics, in seeking out and destroying those who had had a hand in her family's death. She then renounced her family name and took to the streets as Huntress. While she doesn't have any superpowers, she is an excellent fighter and a master with the crossbow. Her great fighting ability and her willingness to cause great harm make her a dangerous enemy and a powerful ally. Number 9. Howard the Duck. Howard the Duck hails from the planet Duck World, where intelligent life evolved from ducks that speak English. Howard was something of a deadbeat, couldn't hold down a job, couldn't fit in with others. When Thog shifted the interdimensional cosmic axis, Howard was sent to Earth and joined Korak the Barbarian, Jennifer Kale, Dakeem the Enchanter, and the Man-Thing to fight Thog. He went on to try to have a normal life while fighting evil in his own fairly incompetent way. Even though he has no powers and isn't the sharpest tool in the shed, he somehow manages to get the job done time and time again. Number 8. Adam Strange. Adam Strange was an archaeologist working in South Africa when he was transported to the planet Ron, or Ran, but I'm gonna go with Ron of course, by a Zeta beam. After meeting and helping the Ranians with a jetpack and ray gun, and even falling in love with a Ranian woman, he returns to Earth. But he does return to Ron from time to time by timing the Zeta beam properly. You know what they say, once you go Ron, you just can't move on. He's since gone on a number of adventures, fighting for Earth and Ron, even taking part in the Ron-Thanagar War. While Strange doesn't have any special abilities other than, like, being a good archaeologist, his proficiency in flight and weaponry makes him a strong hero. Number 7. Batwoman. Catherine Kane was born to military parents. When she was young, she was kidnapped along with her mother and sister by members of the Religion of Crime. By the time her father rescued her, her mother and sister had been executed, which of course was not a great experience for her. After being saved by Batman, she travels the world to learn to fight and become a vigilante herself, using her family's fortune to create new weaponry. She then took on the role of Batwoman, only later joining the Bat family. She fights similarly to the other members, with excellent hand-to-hand combat and use of gadgets. She's probably one of my favorite Bat heroes, since she's more or less self-made, and I really dig her story. Number 6. The Spirit. Going way back in time for this one, the Spirit was created in newspapers in 1940. Denny Colt was an ex-detective who became a masked vigilante after allowing the world to think he was dead. The Spirit might be stretching the definition of no powers, because one could argue that since he hardly ages after being hit in the face by chemicals, he has a power, but since agelessness doesn't really help him fight crime, I'll let it pass. Plus, he's such a ladies' man, which is amazing. He was beautifully described by someone on the internet as Dick Tracy combined with Batman. But I'd add a touch of Tuxedo Mask in there because the guy is quite the charmer. Number 5. Hit Girl. Hit Girl is a young vigilante from Kick-Ass who was trained from a very young age to fight crime in a super brutal fashion. While she, like the other heroes in Kick-Ass, lacks any true superpowers, she's incredibly talented in hand-to-hand combat and a variety of blades and firearms. She also uses the fact that she's a little girl to her advantage, as she can take her enemies by surprise when the cute little girl suddenly charges with a katana. Let's be real, even though Kick-Ass was the title character, Hit Girl was a real hero, and she was pretty damn fierce. Number 4. Vic Sage's The Question. The Question was first introduced in Blue Beetle number 1. Vic Sage was an investigative journalist who uses the artificial skin called pseudoderm over his face as a disguise to hide his identity. He went on to become the vigilante defender of Hub City. While he has no superpowers, he uses his excellent martial arts ability and investigative skills to fight crime while seeking out meaning to his life. Wow, investigative is so hard to say. The mantle of The Question was later taken over by his protege Renee Montoya, but Vic Sage will always be the Question in my heart. Number 3. Booster Gold. Booster Gold was born Michael John Carter in Gotham City in the 25th century. After being expelled from Gotham U for rigging his own football games for gambling, he started working at the Metropolis Space Museum. He uses Rip Hunter's time sphere to go back to the 20th century and get rich using his futuristic tech. Throughout his heroics, he garnered a strong friendship with Blue Beetle, fighting alongside him time and time again. While he has no powers himself, his futuristic technology gives him a number of incredible abilities, such as strength, speed, and flight. He's one of the cockiest heroes out there, but I still think he's great. He also has one of my favorite comic moments ever when Superman tears off his cape and goes full Jack Nicholson saying, "You can't handle the cape." Number 2. The Shoveler. That's right, more Mystery Men. I always look for excuses to put them on the list. The Shoveler was possibly my favorite member of the Mystery Men, played perfectly by William H. Macy. The Shoveler shovels well. He shovels very well. But as his wife loves to remind him, he doesn't have any superpowers. Okay, technically she says he isn't a superhero, which might disqualify him from this list, but he's awesome. What the hell does she know? The Shoveler is wonderfully wholesome, using just his hard hat and shovel to defeat the baddies. What a guy. Number 1. Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. Okay, this one's kind of a gray area, but I think it counts since Hal himself doesn't have any powers and is granted his abilities by the ring. Plus, there are so many relatively obscure heroes on this list that it's nice to have a big name. Hal Jordan was selected to join the Green Lantern Corps when Abin Sur crash-landed on Earth. Using his power ring, he's able to create pretty much anything he can imagine. He's an incredibly powerful hero, but without his ring, he's just some guy, albeit an incredibly ripped guy. I mean, he kicked my butt, but that's a pretty low bar to set. Number 10. Hawkeye. Basically the less cool version of Green Arrow, Hawkeye is still a darn cool hero, with incredible archery abilities and his amazing arsenal of arrows. Hawkeye's also cool because he fights on a team with several other non-superheroes like Black Widow and Iron Man in the Avengers. It's sick watching normal yet incredibly skilled people fighting alongside giant mutants and gods. Batgirl. namely the Barbara Gordon Batgirl, the best one. The daughter of Commissioner Gordon followed in her father's crime-fighting footsteps by taking on the mantle of Batgirl, fighting alongside Batman and the rest of the Bat Gang. Batgirl was the subject of some controversy when she was, spoilers, shot by the Joker and left paraplegic in The Killing Joke. The controversy stemmed around the violence towards women in comics, but I personally don't really get how this is a good example. Considering what happened to Jason Todd in The Killing Joke, what happened to her wasn't quite as bad. Man, I gotta read that again. Number 8. The Punisher. While this may be a bit of a stretch since the Punisher is more of an anti-hero than a superhero, I just like him too much not to include him on this list. Frank Castle is an ex-Marine who, when his family's death has been dealt with by the justice system, decides to take the law into his own hands. He punishes people. By that I mean he kills them. Like, it's great to be a superhero and never kill and everything, life is sacred, blah 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 blah, but sometimes more people can be saved by just ending a supervillain rather than just sticking them in jail for a week before they break out again. Plus, Jon Bernthal is really good as Punisher. Number 7. Black Widow. As if you didn't know she'd be on here. Natalia Romanova is an ex-Russian spy with incredible martial arts abilities as well as various spy-related skills. You have to be good at what you do if you hold your own on a team of people who do have superpowers. That's one thing that kind of bugs me about Black Widow though, that she's just so outclassed by many of the superpowers she fights with and against, but when written properly she can be a really unique force to be reckoned with. She brings a lot of unique skills to the table that sometimes superpowers can't help with. Number 6. Robin. Whether it's Dick Grayson or Jason Todd, Robin knows how to throw down when it comes down to it. While he's often overlooked because he's the sidekick to a way cooler hero, Robin's a great fighter with a keen mind. I particularly like Jason Todd's Robin since his acrobatics were awesome and his storyline is super dark. If you haven't read Death in the Family, seriously, do it. Number 5. Nightwing. While Dick Grayson was a cool Robin, he really comes into his own as Nightwing. Departing from the goody-goody Robin persona, Nightwing takes a more serious stance on crime. Borrowing the identity from Superman, Robin took on the mantle of Nightwing to fight crime. With a high-tech suit with countless compartments for his various goodies, Grayson's Nightwing really shows off what a person can do without superpowers. Number 4. Green Arrow. Oliver Queen is one example of a person who used practice and ingenuity to develop crime-fighting ability. After learning to shoot arrows in order to survive on a deserted island, he began fighting crime using different types of trick arrows and shot styles. While he doesn't keep his money forever and often gives a lot away Robin Hood style, Green Arrow certainly benefited from his fortune when it came to developing his arrow technology. However, that's not to say he only made it because of his money. He's a talented dude who's super brave and pretty clever, and for that, he gets my number 4 spot. Number 3. Star-Lord. If you've been conscious at some point in the last few years, you'll be familiar with Peter Quill, or Star-Lord as he'd like us to call him. Not only is Quill without superpowers, he also lacks the intelligence and funds that many others on this list have. But what he does have is a great team around him, cool gadgets, and charm. And a great boss. Damn, Chris Pratt! While not the coolest hero and certainly not the most competent, Star-Lord remains a fan favorite. Number 2. Batman. Bruce Wayne, the Caped Crusader, finds himself at number 2 on this list because he is perhaps one of the highest regarded superheroes of all time, despite his complete lack of superpowers. You do start to see a trend though. If you don't have superpowers, having money is certainly helpful. While he is gifted with a very high intelligence, tons of money, and an amazing jawline, Bruce Wayne's true power comes from his self-control and martial arts abilities. And gadgets. So many gadgets. Number 1. Iron Man. Some people may disagree and say that Batman should have been number 1, but Tony Stark has one distinct advantage over Bruce Wayne: humor. Stark's sarcasm and boyish charm makes for a much more interesting comic, cartoon, or movie. Batman's always sulking and brooding, "Oh, my parents are dead." But Tony Stark is so much more cheerful and playful. I just like him, okay? Stark does also have high intelligence and lots of money like Bruce Wayne, but there's something about the sarcastic hero in a supersuit that makes me happy. Using his money and smarts to create a power suit with numerous high-tech weapons is awesome, but it's eclipsed by his ability to not be a sulky little brat like Batman sometimes is.
And at number 10, Hawkeye when he was Goliath. Let's begin our list with a character who doesn't have powers, but briefly did have powers, sort of, when he took up the mantle of Goliath. Marvel's resident expert archer decided in 1969 in Avengers issue 63 to succeed Hank Pym as Goliath, allowing him to manipulate his size and mass, while also giving him superhuman strength and durability. Here is the point of contention though with Clint Barton. While he's most known for being Hawkeye, dude has taken over a slew of personas over the years, like Goliath, Ronin, which we saw briefly adapted into Avengers Endgame when he was all broody and killing people after his family got dusted. And then there was also the Golden Archer for a while, as seen in Captain America issue 179 in 1974. So arguably yeah, he can get a little bit confusing. Moving on to number 9, Green Lantern. And all of the iterations. There are a lot of versions of Green Lantern kicking around. In 1940, the first Green Lantern debuted in the comics. Alan Scott. Scott first appeared in All-American Comics issue 16 in 1940, a railroad engineer who, after a crash, came into possession of a magical lantern. From it, he crafted a ring which granted him a bunch of powers, which he would then have to charge every 24 hours by touching it next to the lantern. Now for a long time, he couldn't affect objects made of wood with his powers, and for the most part he fought against mortal foes, minus Vandal Savage and Solomon Grundy. In the Silver Age, the Green Lantern alias was one that got revamped. Alan Scott had fallen into obscurity after 1951, but in 1959, editor Julius Schwartz introduced Hal Jordan, a more science fiction based hero. He had the same powers as Scott, but had a completely different origin and no lantern. He got his power ring from a dying alien named Abin Sur, who was an officer of the Green Lantern Corps, an interstellar law enforcement agency. In the Bronze Age, we were introduced to a handful of new Green Lanterns. Guy Gardner, who was meant to inherit Abin Sur's ring, but Hal was actually closer to the alien at his death. There was John Stewart, a product of the early 70s, who replaced Guy Gardner as the backup lantern. In the modern age, we got Kyle Rayner, who was one of the most notable lanterns after Hal Jordan, and the one you might know as the Green Lantern, whose girlfriend was murdered, cut up, and then stuffed into a fridge, prompting the real-life Women in Refrigerators movement, spearheaded by comic writer Gail Simone. There's been a handful more too, including Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz. Considering they're a complete law enforcement agency, it should be no surprise that there will always be a Green Lantern coming out of the woodwork. There is one for each sector of the universe after all. In at 8, The Question. Don't let the question be a question to you. Sorry, I had to. There has been multiple iterations of the Question over the years, starting with the 1967 version, the original crafted by Steve Ditko in Blue Beetle issue 1. Having just created Mr. A character who was an expression of the objectivist philosophy, he decided to create a less radical version of the character who would be accepted by the Comics Code Authority. Thus, the Question was born. Initially published by Charlton Comics, later acquired by DC in 1983. The first version was Vic Sage, an outspoken investigative journalist who wore an artificial skin he had learned about from a scientist that was meant to be a skin-like bandage. It turned out to be fatal when applied to open wounds, yet one of its co-creators attempted to sell it to third world nations, and Sage used it as a disguise. After stopping that ploy, of course. In 2006, a new Question, a successor to Sage, would come in the form of Renee Montoya, an alcoholic ex-cop who was recruited by the Question and inherited his costume and mask after Sage had died. Thanks to the use of a substance called binary gas, which is expelled by a belt buckle worn by Montoya, her clothes and costume can change color, thanks to them being chemically treated. In at 7, Damian Wayne and all of the Robins. Damian Wayne doesn't mean to be confusing, but when you take up a mantle that has been preoccupied by several iterations of heroes since 1940, it's not surprising that some readers, or those unfamiliar with the history of said alias, might find themselves scratching their heads when it comes to the littlest Wayne. First there was Dick Grayson, who went on to run the Teen Titans and become Nightwing. Then there was Jason Todd, who was a Dick carbon copy, but then became edgy and was voted off the panels by DC readers and subsequently murdered by the Joker because of it. Tim Drake took over, but he went on to be the Red Robin, leaving room for little Damian to step up and become Daddy Dear's sidekick. Yes, we just skipped over Stephanie Brown, sorry guys. So, does Batman age? Well, nah, DC just continues to retcon the timeline so that he stays young and fresh. So it totally makes sense that his son Damian is, Robin, and he still looks like a healthy adult man who isn't aging whatsoever and can still totally fight crime. Yet Dick Grayson is a full-blown adult. Suspend your disbelief. Damian is the son of Bruce and Talia al Ghul, a product of their love affair from Son of the Demon that would be hidden from Batman for years. She faked a miscarriage, but then had the baby anyway. She raises and trains Damian, and then one day leaves him in Bruce's custody in 2006's Batman and Son, which riffed off that previous storyline. And at 6, Green Arrow and his personality change. For a long time, Green Arrow was perceived merely as a knockoff Bruce Wayne, a carbon copy that fancied himself as an archer. First appearing in More Fun Comics issue 73 in 1941, he was a blend between an archer superhero concept mixed with a whole lot of Batman influences. He had a young child sidekick, a vehicle called the Arrow Car, original, an arrow cave that he used as a headquarters, he was a wealthy playboy, and even had a clown-themed enemy. Despite all this, he managed to live past the Golden Age, being used as a backup feature to Superboy comics. But he really didn't hit his prime until 1969, when he was revamped by Neil Adams and Dennis O'Neil, being given his iconic Van Dyke beard and a new costume. In the 70s, he would co-star alongside Hal Jordan, no longer having his wealth, but now existing as an advocate for radical change, a hot-tempered anarchist who cared about the little people. And yes, his young ward Speedy was a junkie for a brief period of time. It's important to know. Up next at 5, Rorschach and his mask. Rorschach, the crude and merciless vigilante from the Watchmen miniseries, is often mistaken for having some sort of power thanks to his mask. His mask, which he refers to as his face, is made of a specialized fabric that has 2 layers of material with viscous black and white fluids trapped between them. These fluids are in constant motion and are affected by heat and pressure, but never combined, making it look like a Rorschach pattern while on his face. While working for a dressmaker, Rorschach aka Walter Kovacs discovered the product when it was used to craft a dress. The dress was ultimately rejected, so he took home the material and used heated instruments to shape it into a fabric to cover his face so that he could look at it in the mirror. So, it's not a power, just a neat trick. And at number 4, Batwoman, her origin versus what she became. There have been 2 iterations of Batwoman over the years, both practically polar opposites of one another, hence why she finds herself on this list. Batwoman first appeared in DC's panels in 1956 in Detective Comics issue 233. That version was Kathy Kane, a superheroine invented solely to make it seem like Batman wasn't gay. Not even joking about that. In the mid-50s, at the end of the golden age of comics, a Senate hearing on censorship in comics was held thanks to the influence of a whack psychiatrist named Frederick Wortham. Wortham had published a book called Seduction of the Innocent that claimed comics were negatively influencing the behavior of kids who read them, and called out multiple different heroes, including Batman, who Wortham claimed was gay with Robin. So DC reacted by creating the Bat family. Superman also got a similar treatment. Kathy Kane was a love interest whose utility belt was actually a utility purse and was filled with feminine-themed objects. Fun. Who needs a Batarang when you've got lipstick? Luckily, she was purged in 1964 after Julia Schwartz became the editor of Batman-related comic books. Then in 2006 we got a brand new iteration of Batwoman, Kate Kane, a cousin of Bruce Wayne who was of Jewish descent and was a lesbian, described as the highest profile gay superhero to ever appear in a DC story. Under Greg Rucka, J.H. Williams III, and W. Hayden Blackman, she would have 2 fantastic runs, one in Detective Comics and a solo series in the New 52, the latter fizzling out when the creative team walked after execs at DC would not let them continue writing a story in which she married her partner. So yeah, overall big difference between the 2 Kanes. And at number 3, Bucky Barnes and his death and return. For a very long time there was an aphorism in comics that no one stays dead except Bucky, Jason Todd, and Uncle Ben. That is definitely not the case anymore, especially with Bucky. James Buchanan Bucky Barnes began his career in comics when he was a child as the boy companion of Captain America. At the end of World War II, the popularity of superheroes began to fade, leading to an era of comics based in sci-fi inspired narratives and concepts, and Bucky fell into obscurity for a bit. A retcon would later establish in the Avengers issue 4 in 1964 that both he and Cap had gone missing at the end of the war. He would make appearances in flashbacks for the most part, and his death would be used as an example for why Marvel refused to use teenage sidekicks in their comics, which was a pet peeve of Stan Lee's. Bucky initially died when trying to defuse a bomb on a plane, believing to have been killed in action, and the explosion it had caused had knocked Steve Rogers into the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. Then in 2005, it was revealed that Bucky had survived. He had been picked up by a Russian patrol submarine, his body preserved by the cold minus his left arm. He suffered from amnesia, was given a bionic arm, and he was programmed as a Soviet assassin, becoming the Winter Soldier. For years he was sent on covert missions as an efficient killer, kept in cryogenic stasis when not out committing homicide. Cap would come face to face with Bucky as the Winter Soldier in Captain America Volume 5 issue 14, where Bucky's memories were restored by the Cosmic Cube. Up next, number 2, Booster Gold. What's his deal? Booster Gold is a strange but entertaining fellow. Some of you might not be aware that he has no powers. His abilities all derive from advanced technology from the future, where he's from. His tech gives him flight, allows him to shoot energy blasts, create force fields, enhances strength, and allows for time travel. First appearing in Booster Gold issue 1 in 1986, Michael John Carter was initially depicted as a glory-seeking showboat who came from the future, and used his knowledge of historical events and futuristic tech to make himself a hero and perform high-publicity stunts. Dude just wanted mad money. But eventually he broke through his poor reputation to become more of a true hero. He was introduced after the Crisis on Infinite Earths, a gifted athlete who lived in 25th century Gotham City whose father re-entered his life when he was in university in order to take advantage of his son's success, and use him as a means to cheat in gambling ventures. Michael would deliberately lose the games, but was eventually exposed and expelled for it. So what did he do? Well, he stole some devices from a museum, traveled to the past, and created a corporation based around him him in order to get rich and famous. Booster Gold these days has been the victim of a whole lot of mental trauma, which started with him deciding that he would do something nice for Batman. He'd bring back his dead parents. As you can guess, that did not turn out too great, with the villains running this new timeline he created. He witnessed Green Lantern kill himself with his own ring, witnessed Selina Kyle kill Bruce's parents anyway, and then Bruce commits suicide. So yeah, not having the best of time right now, that is for sure. And finally, in at number 1, Huntress and her Earth 2 situation. Huntress is a character who often becomes a little baffling thanks to her continuity history. For starters, she first appeared as a character in 1947 in Sensation Comics issue 68. This Golden Age version was Paula Brooks, a supervillain who joined the Injustice Society of America. She would later be retconned as Tigress, a younger version of herself who used to be a hero and fought as a member of the Young All-Stars team. Then, in the Bronze Age, we got Helena Wayne, a huntress who was from Earth 2 and the daughter of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle. But during Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985, she was killed, and her existence was entirely retconned after that event alongside others from Earth 2. She would later be re-established in the New 52, working with Earth 2's Power Girl, both of them retaining their Earth 2 past histories. But let's jump back for a sec. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, a new version of Huntress came to be, one with a similar costume and physical appearance, but a completely different backstory and name. This was Helena Bertinelli, a hero that Batman did not want to work with, seeing her as too unpredictable and violent. Others in the Bat family felt different, and eventually Batman would come around, sponsoring her for membership in the Justice League. But all in all, there's a lot of different Huntresses floating around in the DC universe in the past, so easy to get confused.